So let's warm up with 3 scales, C, D, and G. Here's our C scale, 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do our G scale next. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do our D scale next. 1, 2, 3, 4. In Iroquois Journey, one of the bow strokes we need is a staccato 8th note. So we're going to spend some time talking about this because it's going to take a little bit of focus just to get the technique down. So when we're holding our bows, usually we tend to play on the string. I'm going to play an open A string to demonstrate what I mean. On the string means that our bow never leaves the string. It's always holding onto it even when we're changing. We can play 8th notes short in this technique. But Iroquois Journey, because of the speed and because of the fact that the 8th notes are staccato, requires us to have a little more bounce, a gap between them. So what I'm actually doing here is I'm putting my bow on the string, attacking, and then floating a little bit. So I'll turn a little bit so you can see. I put the bow on the string and I float. Now it's just a tiny amount, but it makes a big difference between on the string and floating. So what you have to think is that if my arm is the string, my bow is coming down and sort of digging in and then releasing. So what I want to do is I want to start off just doing some 8th notes in that with that technique. We call this spiccato. So we put the bow on the string. I'm going to count us off and we're going to pull the first one, and from then on we'll play and lift. Let's try. 8th notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. If you have some trouble doing that, here's some things to keep in mind. You want to make sure that your wrist is nice and buoyant. With French bow, the way we accomplish that is by getting what we call wrist pronation, that our wrist is bent, not straight. Very hard to control when it's straight. But if we bend the wrist and we actually bring our whole shoulder over the instrument, it's very easy to bounce. With German bow, it's a little bit different, but the same rule applies. You don't want to have a straight locked arm. This is going to make it very hard to bounce. With German bow, you want to be a little more relaxed. And once again, let your wrist bend and come to you. Actually, not come to you, but your arm can come to you a little bit. And you'll still get that bounce with the German bow as well. Let's just start Iroquois Journey by looking at the beginning of it. We are in piano. We have accents on the first beat of the first 3 measures. And then we have 8th notes and quarter notes. So in order to execute this, we need to be relaxed, we need to be closer to the fingerboard than to the bridge, and we need to be bouncing. So I'll put on the metronome and I'll play from measure 1 to, let's do measure 9. Here we go. Just listen the first time. 1, 2, 3. So notice our dynamic is piano, but our accents still need to stand out. So I attack and lighten up immediately. It's just enough attack to really cut through the rest of the mix, but not so much that it takes over. That would be excessive. Just a little bit and keep that bounce. Now on bar 4, it's important to realize that we have a long quarter note tied to a staccato quarter note, and then a separate quarter note that is also short. So check it out. G, E, C, A. The G is long, but the E and the C are short. The G and E are in the same down bow. One more time, listen. So take a second look at this passage, look it over, and when you're ready to move on, we'll turn on our metronomes to 130 BPM, the BPM of this song, and try it out. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Just like that. If you're still having trouble at that tempo, what I would suggest doing is just practicing on the A string like we did at the beginning, until you feel that your bounces are even. Let's take a look at measures 33, 34, 35, and 36. So when we're playing in 3/4 and we have a half note followed by a quarter note, it's just commonly understood that the quarter note will be played somewhat short. So for an example, I'll play from 35 to 36. 1, 2, 3. Long, short, long, short, long. So notice my half notes are long. 1, 2. And the quarter notes are short. And the other thing to notice is that we don't need to put full force on the entire half note. In a situation like this, we can touch the beginning of the half note with a little more strength, and then back off and just hold it out with the bow. As opposed to, that'll let any other instruments playing in that pocket to speak out a little more clearly. So I'm going to play 33 through 36 at our tempo, 130 BPM, and then we'll try it together. 33, 1, 2, 3. One more time, 1, 2, 3. Let's try that together at a slightly slower tempo. 120. Get it ready? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now we've come to what might be the hardest part of this piece, measures 37 through 49. There's a lot to break apart here, but let me play it for you one time and then we can dive in. I'll set my metronome to 130 BPM and start. 1, 2, 3. So there's a lot of problems to look at here. First, let's just make a mental note of all the articulation symbols like staccatos and slurs. On 37, we have a staccato right at the beginning. That first E needs to be short. But there is no retake, so we'll be doing an up bow on the slur, which is kind of like a tongue twister. So try that on your own. Short, up bow, and then as it comes into the B. Next at 39, we have a string crossing. A, F, G, C. So from A to F, we have to cross strings. So it's very important that you keep bow speed consistent and you think of it almost as one note. You're holding down F and A at the same time. That way you won't get tripped up in that transition. Next we have another string crossing on 41 from A to E with an up bow on G. This one's a little easier to do because A is open. But this is the really hard part. On 42 we have E to C with a string crossing. So to execute this part, we're going to have to think about how to shift. So I see a lot of young students when they try to shift from one note to another, they take their finger off the bass, they move and put it back down. But in order to do this shift, I'll slide from E to G, and now with one finger I can cross to the G string and hold down the C at the same time. But I can just shift my way to the G string, so I really don't have to hold down both. And that's how we make that shift. You slide, hold down the D string, and then shift to the G string. The next challenge we have in this section, there's a lot of challenges, is our retake on bar 44. We'll be holding out our B, and on 44, after the first chord note, we need to lift, retake, and move our left hand to the A at the same time. 2, 3, 4. Just like that. So when we do our retake, it's okay to cut the chord note a little bit short, but if you completely get rid of it, it defeats the purpose. So please count to 4 when you hold that note. Let's try playing this passage together at a significantly slower tempo. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Our next passage is all about dynamics. From 49 to 53, we have one long crescendo into forte. We are coming from a dynamic of mezzo forte. So there's not a big difference between mezzo forte and forte, but the audience wants to hear something dramatic. So what we're going to do is at 49, we're actually going to drop our dynamic down to a mezzo piano or even a piano and build up from there so that it feels much bigger and much more interesting. So I'll start from 45 and I want you to see how quiet I get at 49 so that I build back up to 53 at a forte and really just wow the listener. From 45 to 53. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And so on. Our next passage is also about dynamics. Take a look at 79. The notes are pretty simple, but we need to make sure we crescendo through them. And let's also remember our rule that if we're playing a dotted half note, we're probably not the most interesting part at that time. So let's attack at the beginning and then lay off a little bit. We can save the crescendo more towards the end, but just like the last passage, I think it'll be a lot more dramatic if we actually don't start at mezzo forte, but a little quieter. So let's try that. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Iroquois Journey is a very challenging piece, but with the help of a metronome and consistent practice at a slower tempo, you'll be able to play some of these difficult passages at 130 BPM easily. So keep up the good work, and I'll see you next time.